How does humanity launch a massive transcontinental rescue operation? Not for a downed pilot or a high-ranking official, but for just 17 ounces of a strange red liquid. It comes down to a fundamental code that defines the very edge of modern medicine. Leave no one behind. To save a single life, the world is willing to mobilize dozens of top-tier medical specialists, clear a high-altitude corridor across 3 international borders, and override the bureaucratic inertia of 3 different governments, all for one heartbeat. This isn't a story about gold or oil. It's about something far more precious and far more dangerous. In the world of hematology, it is known as Rh-null, but to the few who carry it, it is called golden blood. It is a biological treasure, a universal key that can save almost anyone on the planet. But for the person whose veins it flows through, it is a curse. It is a genetic anomaly so rare that fewer than 50 people in the history of mankind have ever been confirmed to possess it. If you have it, you are the world's most valuable resource. But if you need it, and your supply runs dry, you are essentially a ghost. You are invisible to the global blood bank system. But what happens when the impossible occurs? What happens when a golden blood carrier is dying in a remote corner of the world, thousands of miles away from the only match on Earth? Tonight, we decode the most complex medical logistics operation ever attempted. A race against biology, borders, and the ticking clock. This is the story of how the world moved heaven and earth to stop a single heartbeat from fading. How did a tiny 500 milliliter bag of liquid trigger a global emergency? It all started with a single phone call that shattered the silence of a high-security lab. The call came in at 02:45 hours. In a small, dimly lit medical outpost tucked into the jagged peaks of the Peruvian Andes, all hell was about to break loose. A local miner had been rushed in following a structural collapse. He was stable, but barely. Internal hemorrhaging had started, and the surgeon on duty realized they were looking at a tactical nightmare. It wasn't the severity of the injury that froze the room. It was the blood type on the chart, Rh-null. In this remote region, 11,000 feet above sea level, the hospital's blood bank was a joke. They had O-negative, sure, but for this patient, O-negative was a death sentence. To his immune system, anything other than the golden blood was an invading force to be annihilated. This is the medical equivalent of being stranded deep behind enemy lines with a broken compass and no extraction plan. The patient's hemoglobin levels were cratering, dropping from a healthy 14 to a lethal 5 in less than 2 hours. The circle of survival was closing fast. This brings us to stage 2, the mobilization of the invisible net. When a golden blood emergency hits, triggers a protocol more complex than a multinational carrier strike. The International Society of Blood Transfusion, or ISBT, acts as the central command. They don't just check a database. They initiate a high-stakes hunt across the globe, scanning for one of the 35 active donors scattered across the planet. But there's a catch. You can't just fly blood across international borders like a laptop or a crate of fruit. You're dealing with biological priority 1 cargo. This is where the medical deception game begins. To get this blood from a donor in, say, Zurich, Switzerland to a mountainside in Peru, the ISBT has to navigate a minefield of international law, customs, and air traffic control. They utilize what we call diplomatic fast-tracking. They don't wait for paperwork. They leverage emergency treaties that allow life-saving biologicals to bypass the standard radar of bureaucracy. In the eyes of the law, this 500 milliliter bag becomes a non-stop sovereign asset. Look at the logistics map here. This is the donor site in Switzerland, and this is the target, a tiny landing strip 6,000 miles away. To make this work, the military-grade cold chain kicks in. We aren't talking about a styrofoam cooler with some ice packs. We're talking about active cooling transport vaults, the medical equivalent of a stealth bomber's avionics suite. These units, like the Va-Q-Tech thermal containers, are engineered to maintain a precise temperature of 4 degrees Celsius with zero margin for error. If the temperature fluctuates by even 2 degrees, the red blood cells begin to undergo hemolysis, literally explode. The mission is scrubbed, and the patient dies. These vaults are equipped with GPS tracking and real-time atmospheric sensors that transmit data via satellite to a command center in Bristol. They are an unblinking eye on the cargo, ensuring the payload remains viable while crossing the Atlantic at 500 miles per hour. But even with the best tech, Father Time is a ruthless adversary. As the transport jet clears European airspace, the patient in Peru is entering the critical zone. His blood pressure is bottoming out, for his heart is racing at 140 beats per minute just to keep his brain from shutting down. Every second that passes is a Hydra rocket hitting his system. The local doctors are performing a desperate terrain masking maneuver, using synthetic volume expanders to keep his veins from collapsing, but it's a temporary fix. It's like trying to run a jet engine on soapy water. It might keep the turbines spinning, but it won't provide the thrust needed to climb out of the valley. While the medical combat king, a chartered long-range Gulfstream, is screaming across the ocean, a secondary extraction team is being assembled on the ground in Lima. This includes a specialized medical helicopter, a Bell 429 Global Ranger prepped for high-altitude flight. They are stripping the interior to save weight, maximizing every ounce of lift for the thin Andean air. This isn't just a flight, it's a high-stakes pave-hawk mission. The pilots are calculating the density, altitude, and mountain wave turbulence. One wrong gust of wind on the approach to that 11,000-foot ridge, and the rescue bird becomes part of the mountain. Supporting them is the UNOS Global Communication Network, casting an invisible net of satellite links and ground relay stations. Or they are clearing the flight path, forcing commercial airliners into holding patterns to create a sacred corridor for the golden blood. But as the blood reaches the Peruvian coastline, everything goes wrong. A massive weather front, a slugfest of thunder and lightning, is rolling off the Pacific, slamming into the mountains and grounding all non-essential flights. Suddenly, the extraction bird is facing a wall of gray. The logic of the mission is simple. The blood doesn't reach the patient. In the next 90 minutes, the 6,000-mile journey was for nothing. The commanders are faced with a scorched earth decision. Do they risk the helicopter and the crew in a zero-visibility mountain run, or do they watch the donor's gift, the rarest substance on Earth, expire in a storage box? This is where the human factor overrides the technical factor. The pilots engage their night vision goggles and infrared sensors, diving back into the valleys, racing for the ridge. Below them, the rugged battleground of the Andes is a tactical nightmare. Jagged peaks and deep, narrow canyons provide zero room for error. The clock is at T-minus 75 minutes. The patient's heart is starting to fail. This is the map of the final approach. This is the clinic, and this is the storm. To save the miner, the crew has to execute a low-level strafing run through the clouds, navigating by sheer instinct and radar altimeters. They are pushing the engines to the red line, their voices tight on the radio as they coordinate with the ground team. The invisible net is tightening. The world is watching a tiny pulsing light on a GPS screen, praying that the golden blood makes it to the kill zone before the heart stops beating. But how did we get to this point? Why is one man's biology so uniquely incompatible with the rest of the species? To understand that, we have to look deeper into the bioradar of the human body and the catastrophic hydraulic failure that happens when the wrong fuel is pumped into the system. As the helicopter clears the final ridge, the real fight is just beginning. Stage 3, the climax. The ridge is cleared, but the battle is far from over. Just as the Bell 429 clears the final Andean peak, the Pacific weather front slams into the airframe with the force of a kinetic strike. This is the moment where physics overrides the flight plan. The pilot is wrestling with a severed visual horizon, the altimeter spinning like a broken compass. To avoid a catastrophic impact, they are forced to execute a controlled tactical descent. They aren't landing at a state-of-the-art trauma center. They are dropping into a ghost site, an abandoned agricultural airstrip, just 200 feet wide and choked with overgrowth, located 40 miles out from the target clinic. This is the medical equivalent of a forward operating base inside a contested kill zone. Suddenly, the rescue mission has turned into a fight for survival. The ground team from the clinic, 2 surgeons and a trauma nurse, is racing toward the coordinates in a beat-up 4x4, navigating mudslides and washed-out roads. When they arrive, the scene is an absolute slugfest. Inside the cramped, vibrating cabin of the grounded helicopter, under the dim glow of tactical flashlights, they establish a steel fortress defensive perimeter around the patient. But they aren't fighting off militias. They are fighting the collapse of a human's internal hydraulics. The patient is in stage 4 hemorrhagic shock. His veins are flat, his heart is fluttering in a desperate, uncoordinated dance. Here is the stark, brutal truth of the Sandy Protocol in medicine. The payload is more valuable than the platform. To keep that 500 milliliter bag of golden blood from hitting its thermal expiration limit, the team is willing to burn every other resource. They utilize the helicopter's auxiliary power unit just to keep the transport vault's cooling fans spinning, even if it means they won't have enough fuel to take off again. At this moment, the half-liter of Rh-null liquid is the most guarded asset on the planet. If the blood expires, the mission is a total loss. But why? Why move heaven and earth for a few ounces of red liquid? To understand the insanity of this rescue, we have to look at the bioradar of the human body. In the world of aviation, the F-35 Lightning II is designed to be practically invisible to long-range radar. It achieves this through geometry and radar-absorbing materials that reduce its radar cross-section to the size of a bird. In the world of biology, your red blood cells have their own radar signature called antigens. Most humans carry a complex array of proteins and sugars on the surface of their blood cells. The most famous is the Rh system. While you probably know it as just positive or negative, the Rh system actually contains 61 different antigens. Think of these antigens as transponders. When a foreign blood cell enters your body, your immune system, your internal early warning radar, scans these transponders. If the identification friend or foe FF code doesn't match, your immune system launches a symphony of destruction. It unleashes a storm of antibodies designed to lock onto and annihilate the invading cells, leading to catastrophic systemic failure. Now, look at the F-35. It is optimized to defeat radio frequency radar, but it has a massive vulnerability: its heat signature. Its single Pratt & Whitney engine produces a plume so intense that an infrared search and track system can see it from miles away, even if the radar screens are blank. Rh-null blood, the golden blood, is the biological F-35. It is the only blood type on Earth that is missing all 61 antigens in the Rh system. It has a radar cross-section of 0. To any other human's immune system, golden blood is a ghost. It emits no radar energy. It can be pumped into almost any patient on the planet, and their bioradar will never see it coming. It is the ultimate universal donor, but this is the crazy part. This stealth is a one-way street. Because the Rh-null carrier has an immune system that has never seen an Rh antigen, it is hypersensitized. If a golden blood carrier receives even one drop of normal blood, their body detects it instantly. It doesn't matter if the donor is O negative or O positive. To an Rh-null patient, every other human on Earth is glowing on their bioradar. Their immune system would react with the violence of a Tor surface-to-air missile battery, causing a proximity detonation of the red blood cells that would shut down the kidneys in minutes. This is the ultimate evolutionary paradox. Through millions of years of genetic engineering, nature created a blood type so perfectly stealthy that it can save anyone, yet it rendered the owner of that blood completely defenseless. A single genetic fluke, a mutation in the RHAG gene, has turned these 50 people into biological sovereigns who are also the most vulnerable humans alive. Back at the abandoned airstrip, the slugfest has reached its climax. The surgeons have managed to establish a central line. The thermal vault is opened. The golden blood is cold, exactly 4 degrees Celsius. As the first few drops enter the patient's system, the body doesn't even flinch. There is no immune alarm, no missile lock warning. This is the aha moment of biology. The stealth coding is working. Under the umbrella of that intense medical cover, the patient's blood pressure begins to stabilize. The hydra rockets of shock are being neutralized. For the first time in 6 hours, the heart rate begins to drop from the kill zone back into a tactical rhythm. It took a 6,000-mile transatlantic flight, a high-altitude helicopter run through a Pacific storm, an emergency landing on a dirt strip, and the coordination of 3 governments, but the payload has been delivered. This incident challenges everything we know about global logistics, highlighting that in the face of a total biological blackout, the only thing that scales is human resolve. The life is saved. The stealth asset has been recovered. But as the sun begins to rise over the Zagros, the Andes, the team realizes that this was just one engagement in a much longer war. Because as long as there are only 50 people with this golden radar on Earth, the mission to leave no one behind will never truly end. The patient is loaded back onto the bird, maxed out on weight but alive. Now we move to the final phase, the return to base and the cost of the promise. Stage 4, the dues. In a world of 8 billion people, it is incredibly easy to feel like just another data point, a flickering light in a massive, cold database. But as we've witnessed tonight, the global medical machine doesn't see it that way. When one heart falters, especially a heart carrying the rarest, most invisible genetic signature on Earth, the entire planet stops to listen. Leave no one behind isn't just a military code whispered on a battlefield or carved into a mountain ridge. In the realm of medicine, it is a fundamental biological instinct. It is the ultimate human promise that your life, no matter how unique or vulnerable, is worth moving heaven and earth to protect. We build these documentaries from scratch, using the raw textures of papercraft and the rhythmic pulse of stop motion to visualize the invisible wars happening inside your veins. We believe that the staggering complexity of our own biology deserves to be told with a handcrafted touch, humanity explaining humanity. If you want to join our small team on more of these tactical journeys, decoding the industrial wonders of the body and the high-stakes logistics of survival, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned. We have many more files to declassify. But before you click away, Take a moment to consider the red liquid moving through your own heart right now. Most of us treat it as an afterthought, but for those 50 individuals, every drop is a miracle and a target. Do you actually know your own radar signature? Because in the end, we are all just one genetic fluke away from becoming the most valuable and the most fragile asset on the planet.